Welcome back to the crypto roller coaster. In our last video, we showed you why Bitcoin could be setting up for a potential rally, and that's exactly what happened since then. Bitcoin flawlessly held support of its 50-day moving average for several days, then blasted off to a fresh 2-month high. Bitcoin also experienced a wild ride recently as some pretty big fake news sparked a frenzy that launched the king of crypto 2,000 points higher in less than 10 minutes, briefly kissing the 30K mark. Now, the massive price spike faded quickly, but here's the kicker. Bitcoin's still holding above the pre-news level and could be setting up for another attempt at that 30K mark. But what about altcoins? Well, Ethereum and other leaders are struggling and showing relative weakness, but there's a few notable exceptions to keep an eye on. In this video, we explore recent Bitcoin price action and walk through the charts to show you why crypto traders have been on the edge of their seats lately. We also highlight several hot altcoins on our radar that could be setting up for a potential buy entry in the coming days. So before we get started, be sure to press the like button, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell to ensure you always stay on top of all the hottest crypto trading action. When we last checked in on Bitcoin, it had pulled back to key support of its 50-day moving average, which is this red line. And you may recall we said that the 50-day moving average is one of the most important indicators of intermediate term trend. Notice how earlier in the previous month, the 50-day moving average actually acted as resistance when the price was below it. And then in late September, Bitcoin popped above the 50-day moving average. And at that point, the 50-day moving average went from acting as resistance to becoming new support. That's the most basic tenet of technical analysis, that a prior level of resistance becomes the new support after the resistance is broken. And that's exactly what you can see in action here. Notice how the price pulled back to that 50-day moving average, held right at that level precisely for several days, and then the buyers returned. Now, we actually popped right back above the short-term resistance of the 10 and 20-day moving averages that we'd mentioned, and we powered through, which is one of the scenarios we mentioned. We powered through to a new swing high, popped above this prior high from October 2nd. Now, we'll talk about this big spike here in a minute, which was driven by news, but let's leave the news out of it for now and just focus purely on the technicals. So without even factoring in the news, purely from a technical level, Bitcoin was poised for a rally, and the news simply helped drive that. Now, currently, Bitcoin for the past 2 days has been holding right at support of that breakout level and holding at a fresh 2-month high. So that's pretty encouraging because it means the intermediate term trend may be shifting to bullish, with the 50-day moving average now acting as support. And we've also got the rising 10 and 20-day moving averages that will now act as support. So if we get any kind of a pullback in Bitcoin, here's some levels you want to keep an eye on. First of all, we've got this prior swing high from August 29th, way back here. This formerly acted as resistance when we first attempted to rally earlier this month. Notice how resistance of that August 29th high held the rally in place, and we couldn't get above that in the first couple rally attempts earlier in October. However, after that pullback to the 50-day moving average, the next rally attempt did blast through above that resistance level. So now that resistance level, that former resistance level, I should say, will now act as support right around the 28,160 area. You can see that that's right where that support is. So any kind of a pullback, look for that support level to hold in the short term. That's going to be a very positive sign if that support level holds. Now, in the Morpheus Crypto portfolio, we actually sent a trade alert to our members yesterday, letting them know that we were buying into Bitcoin on that first pullback. When we got a pullback to this support level, right around 28,200, we said we were getting in Bitcoin and setting our stop well below the 10 and 20-day moving averages. If you're a member, you should note the trade alert for our exact stop price. If Bitcoin pulls back and this 28,160 area fails to hold, then next support would be the rising 10 and 20-day moving averages, which is right between 27,500 to 27,800. Those would be your next support levels. And actually an undercut, a dip below this 28,160 area would not be surprising, but we definitely want to see the price hold above the 10 and 20-day moving averages. Not so good if we dip down below that, since we've broken out to a new swing high. Now, as for resistance, well, there's no shortage of resistance. First of all, the 30,000 mark was the high of several days ago. Actually went just above the 30,000 mark, but that rally was really short-lived, only lasted a few minutes, and we're going to show you that intraday chart here in a minute. But in terms of resistance in the coming week, obviously we've got resistance all the way up to that high of the October 16th day. But really what we're looking at here is from back over the summer, Bitcoin was trading in a range between 28,500 all the way up to 31,800 area. So for several months, this was acting as a base of consolidation. Now, when we broke down below that level, all these people who bought in this range at higher levels are trapped. And that's what creates what we call overhead supply. And that's also what creates resistance. So basically, as we attempt to rally back up to these levels, all these people that bought at higher levels that are trapped, they tend to sell and just to try to break even, and that causes resistance, and that makes the prices go back down. So it may be a little bit challenging for Bitcoin to get back up into this range above the 29,000 mark on the first attempt or so. But as long as we hold above these support levels that we mentioned, then the price action is constructive. So we formed a higher high on the daily chart, and we've now got two higher lows. Here's our first higher low from the low back in September 11th. We got our first higher low, second higher low, and now we've got our first higher high, and now we formed a second higher high. So we've got a new intermediate term uptrend developing in Bitcoin. Now let's talk about that crazy price spike that we saw a couple of days ago, where the price rallied from about 28,000 all the way to just over 30,000 in less than 10 minutes. This is an intraday chart that I've switched to. It's a 5-minute chart, so each bar that you see here represents 5 minutes of price action. And notice here that on October 16th, we were just cruising along, consolidating right below the 28,000 level, and suddenly, boom, all the way up to 30,000. But then a few minutes later, right back down to where we started. What the heck is this all about? Well, there's been news now going on for quite a while, many months, speculation of the SEC eventually approving the first spot Bitcoin ETF. And traders and investors have been anxiously anticipating this approval. And on Monday morning, news was released that the SEC approved the first spot Bitcoin ETF for BlackRock, but it was found out pretty quickly that it was actually fake news. When it was discovered that it was fake news, traders sold into that move pretty quickly, which is, could be considered a negative. But actually, what's pretty interesting here and notable is that notice how, despite the fake news, once the price action settled after this initial sell-off, the price action settled at a higher level than where we were before the news. So the reaction ultimately, despite the news, was still positive, and that can be attributed to technical analysis. If we remove the news from the equation completely and we just look at the chart, and this is an hourly chart here that we're looking at, we can see that even before that big spike that we had, there's that big spike. Even before that, we were forming a bullish consolidation near the highs from the rally that occurred earlier in the day. So again, it's all about the technicals. That's why at Morpheus Trading, we don't pay attention to news really. We don't follow what the social hype of what's hot on TikTok or on Instagram. Instead, we rely on technical analysis to be our guide. And the price action tells us everything we need to know. So news or no news, we see that this was a bullish chart pattern going into the news, and as a result, the prices continued higher even despite the news being fake. Now, it's also notable that the fact that we held up despite the fake news is a good sign, kind of an indication that the move was for real, and also gives us kind of a sneak peek as to what may actually happen when the news that's real is released. We could see a kind of a similar spike that sticks. And, it's our opinion that most likely this news will eventually happen, but who knows when, right? So instead of waiting for that news and trying to trade the news, we prefer instead to just, again, let technical analysis be our guide. So, again, we're now long Bitcoin from this pullback, switching back to the daily chart right around the 28,200 mark, and we'll continue to monitor the price action in the coming days. Definitely looking better than it was a month ago when we were still setting lower lows and lower highs. Again, we've now set two higher highs and two higher lows on the daily chart. Now let's shift gears and take a look at how the altcoin market is performing. You may recall in our last video when we showed you that Bitcoin had pulled back to support of its 50-day moving average. Ethereum, on the other hand, had shown relative weakness and had sold off all the way down to test its prior lows of September 11th. So while we had Bitcoin simply pulling back to its 50-day moving average after a recent rally, Ethereum was already testing the lows of a multi-month range. So that relative weakness meant that where the action's at is in Bitcoin, not the altcoin market. And the altcoin started to look good initially in late September, but since then it's been pretty weak. Now, that's not surprising. Often when we see strength in the crypto market, the cycle tends to follow a pattern where money first flows into Bitcoin. And when Bitcoin eventually takes a rest, then the money flows into large cap altcoins and then into some of the smaller and so forth. And this cycle we've seen over the years many times over and over again. So most likely what we're going to see now is continued rotation into Bitcoin until Bitcoin runs into some resistance. And remember, we've got the Bitcoin dominance index nearing resistance of its 52-week high, which could spark some rotation out of Bitcoin and back into the altcoin market. But in the meantime, until that happens, there's really no need to focus on Ethereum. We don't want to trade relative weakness. We want to buy relative strength. So instead of messing around with Ethereum, definitely Bitcoin has a cleaner chart pattern with less overhead resistance and definitely a more bullish daily chart pattern. But nevertheless, we keep an eye on Ethereum. If Ethereum gets back above its 50-day moving average and can stick above the 16, 18 level, then it will be of more interest. But with a price below the 10, 20, and 50-day moving averages, there's no need to fight that trend. We'd rather be trading relative strength, which is Bitcoin. Most of the altcoin market has been weak alongside of Ethereum over the past week. There have been a few notable exceptions, though. One of those exceptions is Solana, SOL. And Solana is actually one of the positions that we've been holding in Morpheus Crypto. We originally bought SOL back in September when it broke out above this downtrend line here. And then we sold into strength of that first move in early October. We made a 26% gain. You may remember a previous video where we walked you through that trade. And then we got out. We sold near the top. We got out. We waited for this pullback. SOL pulled back and held support of its 20-day moving average after a brief undercut there. And we were looking for a reentry. And we actually bought back into SOL on October 16th. As soon as the price action moved back above this tight 5-day range and back above this 10 and 20-day moving average, we sent a trade alert to Morpheus Crypto subscribers, and we said we were re-entering SOL right around the 2230 area with a stop below the low of that breakout candle. And that day, SOL continued to show very bullish price action, went all the way up to test the high of early October. Just in one day, we recovered basically 2 weeks of a pullback in one day. So that's some bullish price action. And since that day, SOL has been forming a bull flag pattern near its highs, consolidating there, showing some bullish price action. So we're anticipating here, after a brief consolidation, maybe slight pullback, a potential breakout above the prior swing highs of October. And if we do break out above the October highs, notice going back to August, we got the potential to break out here above a pretty significant level. If we get above, let's say, 2550, that's going to put us into the highest levels that we've seen since July. And with less overhead supply, we could actually make a run all the way up to the ultimate highs from July of this year. We could see a run all the way up to the highs of July around 32, but we've got a ways to go until we get there. So for now, we're just analyzing the price action. Remember, part of our strategy is we don't predict price action, we react to it. In other words, we trade what we see, not what we think. But SOL right now is definitely one of the better looking top relative strength cryptos in the market. And we continue to hold this with this solid 8% gain since our entry point so far. We also want to draw your attention to LOOM, LOOM. LOOM has been an extremely hot altcoin throughout the past month. Notice how back in mid-September, LOOM broke out above a base. And the big key here is the volume. Notice how volume really surged substantially as soon as that breakout occurred. And it kicked in motion a steady rally that took LOOM from 5 cents all the way up to a high of 50 cents, a 1,000% increase, a 10x increase essentially in less than a month, from September 19th all the way up to October 15th, 1,000%, 10x in less than a month. Now, of course, we don't chase breakouts. If we don't catch a breakout early on and there was no indication that this was going to stick, we wait for a significant pullback. And you can see how the 10-day moving average has been perfectly acting as support on the way up. And we've been monitoring LOOM for a significant pullback now for quite a while behind the scenes. And we now are getting that pullback. The price has dipped below the 10 and 20-day moving average. And that's the kind of pullback we want to see. But we don't just blindly buy and try to guess the bottom. We now want to wait for some bottoming action to occur, such as at least the higher lows on the hourly and the 4-hour charts. And once we start to see some bottoming action, then we'll look for a potential buy entry. And if we do spot a buy entry, we'll send a trade alert to our members of Morpheus Crypto. But patience is key here, because this could easily take another week or two until we spot a relatively low risk pullback entry point. But it's definitely on our radar and should be on your radar too, because LOOM is one of the hottest altcoins over the past month out of all the altcoins in the market. And if you're new to Morpheus Trading, head on over to morpheustrading.com and click on Crypto Picks to find out more about our exclusive crypto swing trading service, where you can make gains like 26% that we scored on SOL last month. Head on over to morpheustrading.com to find out more. See you in our next Morpheus Crypto video.